At the edge of a small, dusty town, there was a general store that stood like an old sentinel against the setting sun. Inside the store, amid the jars of candy and shelves stuffed with goods, sat a girl named Lily. She was no more than 10 years old, with wild brown hair that danced like the wind and eyes that sparkled with curiosity. But one thing set her apart from the other children: she had no shoes. Every day, Lily would roam through the town, her little feet bare against the rough ground. Some of the townsfolk would glance at her with pity, while others simply ignored her. The reality was harsh. Her family struggled to make ends meet, and buying shoes was a luxury they couldn't afford. One summer day, a traveler named Thomas arrived in town. He was on his way to visit a distant relative. As he stepped into the general store, the bell jingled above him, and he was hit with the warm smell of bread and spices. Thomas was a friendly man with a heart as big as the open sky. He noticed Lily sitting cross-legged in the corner, playing with a worn-out doll. He said, kneeling down so they were "Why?" "Lily," she replied shyly, her eyes wide with surprise that a stranger would talk to her. "Nice to meet you, Lily," Thomas said, a smile spreading across his face. Lily looked down at her feet and shrugged. "I don't have any," she said softly, evoking a twinge of sadness in Thomas's heart. He could see the dirt smudged on her small feet and the way she held her doll protectively. As Thomas browsed the store, he couldn't shake the thought of Lily. He thought about how easily he took his own life for granted. Even a simple pair of shoes felt far beyond reach for Lily. He made his way to the counter where the storekeeper, an elderly man named Mr. Jenkins, stood polishing a small bell. Thomas asked, nodding towards Lily. Mr. Jenkins sighed. "Yeah, that's Lily. Her family's been struggling for a while. Shoes aren't the only thing they need." Thomas felt a stirring in his chest. He had come to this town by chance, but now he felt like he was meant to be here, meant to help. He asked, already imagining how those little feet would look in new shoes. The old man raised his eyebrows in surprise. "That's mighty kind of you, but it's not just shoes she needs." Thomas nodded. He pulled out his wallet, feeling the weight of his decision. It was a small gesture, but he knew it could mean the world to Lily and her family. Then, as if to solidify his resolve, he walked over to Lily. Her eyes lit up when he approached again. She was unsure why he kept talking to her, but something about his kindness made her feel safe. Her eyes went wide, and for a moment she looked stunned. "Really, but I don't have any money," she stammered, looking down as if she'd done something wrong. "You don't need money. I want to buy you shoes," Thomas said, kneeling down to her level. Lily's face broke into a smile, but then she hesitated. "What if they're too pretty? My feet are dirty," she whispered as if ashamed. At that moment, Thomas understood how much this little girl had weathered. "Lily, it doesn't matter. They'll be yours, and you can wear them however you like." With a hesitant nod, she took his hand, and together they stepped out of the store. The sun hung low in the sky, casting a warm glow over the town. As they walked, Thomas shared stories of his travels, hoping to lift her spirits. He watched as her laughter blended with the music of the day. When they reached the shop that sold shoes, Thomas's heart raced. The wooden sign creaked in the wind, and he opened the door for her. Inside, colorful shoes lined the walls like jewels waiting to be discovered. "Pick any pair you like," he said, watching her eyes fill with wonder. Lily hesitated, glancing at the rows of shoes. After a moment, she spotted a pair of bright red sneakers with white laces. She asked, a hint of excitement bubbling in her voice. Thomas said, grinning. He sat with her as she tried on the shoes. They fit perfectly. The shoes had a little sparkle, and when she looked down, her eyes shone brighter than ever. "Wow," she whispered, almost in disbelief. "And they're for you," Thomas reminded her gently. Then he remembered the other need. "Let's find some food now." After picking up the shoes, they stopped at the local grocery store. They filled a basket with bread, fruits, and vegetables. With each item added, Thomas felt a sense of purpose growing in him. Lily's excitement was infectious. She giggled as she grabbed some apples, holding them close like they were treasures. "Thank you," she said earnestly, looking up at him. Thomas nodded, feeling a warmth wash over him. When they returned to the general store, Mr. Jenkins was at the counter. His eyes widened as he saw the shoes in Lily's hands and the groceries piled high. He asked Thomas, a mix of disbelief and admiration in his voice. "It's just a small gesture," Thomas shrugged, still feeling overwhelmed by the joy in Lily's eyes. Before he left, Thomas looked at Lily, whose cheeks were rosy with excitement. "Remember, it's not just about the shoes or the food, it's about kindness," he said, kneeling down again. Lily nodded, absorbing his words like a sponge. Wanted to remember this day forever. As Thomas waved goodbye, he felt a wave of satisfaction. In his heart, he knew this wasn't about him. It was about making a difference, however small. Days turned into weeks. Thomas continued on his journey, but he kept thinking about Lily. He often wondered if she wore her shoes and if her family had enough food. Meanwhile, in the little town, things began to change for Lily. She wore her new shoes every day, and the confidence they gave her was undeniable. Those bright red sneakers became a symbol for her. They represented hope and the kindness of a stranger who cared. Lily's family received the groceries Thomas had bought, but it wasn't just about the food or shoes. It connected them to the spirit of the community. Inspired by Thomas's generosity, the townsfolk started to gather and help each other more. They began organizing food drives and helping families in need, creating a ripple effect of compassion. One day, as Lily played outside with other children, running and laughing, she spotted Mr. Jenkins. He was setting up a small free library in front of the general store, hoping to encourage kids to read. "Mr. Jenkins," she called, pointing to her shoes. He replied, beaming at her. She ran up to him, her heart racing with excitement. "And the other kids are helping too. We're collecting food for families." A sense of pride swelled in Mr. Jenkins's chest. It felt like the town had finally come together. He looked down and noticed the little girl's shoes again, and it dawned on him just how much of an impact a single act of kindness could have on a community. In the weeks that followed, Lily often visited the general store. With her new sense of belonging and confidence, she began to help Mr. Jenkins organize the food drives, carrying boxes and sorting items. The girl without shoes had transformed into a small leader, inspiring others, all because of a single act of kindness. Then one summer afternoon, Thomas returned to the town, not as a traveler, but as a friend. The townsfolk welcomed him back with open arms, eager to share the stories of how things had changed. He found Lily packing boxes for the drive, her red sneakers still shining brightly. As he approached, she paused, then ran to him. "Mister," she called, her voice filled with joy. "Thank you for the shoes. We've been helping so many families now." Thomas smiled wide, feeling tears prick his eyes. "I'm so proud of you, Lily." As they stood together, watching other children play and families come together, Thomas realized how much the ripple of kindness had spread. What began as one simple gesture had transformed lives. It reminded him that in this complicated world, one act of compassion could spark a beautiful change. The sun dipped low as they looked out over the town, and in that moment Thomas knew he had found something priceless: connection, warmth, and the spirit of community, all leading back to a little girl who once had no shoes. Now, with her bright red shoes on her feet and kindness in her heart, she was a force of change that would resonate for years. The sun hung low in the sky, casting long shadows across a small town where life seemed to move at a slower pace. Birds chirped as they flitted between the trees, while the scent of freshly baked bread wafted from the general store, mingling with the earthy aroma of warm summer air. But amid this everyday peace, something tugged at the heartstrings of anyone who dared to look closely. In one corner of the store, a girl sat cross-legged on the floor, her small hands tightly gripping a tattered doll. Her name was Lily, and her feet were bare, the soles dusty from countless days spent running down gravel roads. In her eyes there was a story written in shades of longing, vulnerability, and quiet hope. To most, she was just a fixture in the store, easily overlooked. But to those who noticed, she was a reminder of the struggle that lingered just beneath the surface of their quaint town. One afternoon, an unexpected visitor walked through the door. His name was Thomas. He was a traveler, passing through on his way to the next town, but as soon as he entered, the warmth of the store enveloped him like a comforting blanket. The bell above the door jingled a cheerful welcome, drawing his attention to the shelves filled with goods, but his eyes quickly fell upon Lily. "Hey there, little miss," he said, his voice warm and inviting. She looked up, her big eyes shimmering with a mixture of surprise and shyness. "Lily," she whispered, unsure of what to make of this kind stranger who had knelt down to her level. "Lily," he repeated, savoring the sweetness of her name. "Nice to meet you." A shadow crossed her face and she cast her eyes down to her dusty feet. "I don't have any," she mumbled, her voice barely above a whisper. The vulnerability in her words pierced Thomas like a dart as he realized the depth of her truth. A sense of urgency surged through him. Here was a girl, a child, weighted down by hardships far too heavy for her small frame. He turned away to grab a few items from the shelves, but his mind kept drifting back to her. With each step, he could feel a small flame igniting in his heart, a desire to change her situation, even if just a little. As he made his way to the counter, he approached the grizzled old man standing behind it. "Mr. Jenkins, the storekeeper. You know her?" Thomas asked, his voice steady but laced with concern. Mr. Jenkins sighed deeply, wiping his brow as if the heat had grown unbearable. "Yeah, that's Lily. Tough situation for her family. They're struggling, shoes, food, you name it." A mix of anger and heartache churned in Thomas. "She deserves better than this," he said, his voice gaining strength. Mr. Jenkins regarded him thoughtfully, recognizing the fire in this traveler's spirit. "It's easy to say, my friend." Thomas nodded slowly, pondering the weight of those words, but deep down he refused to let that stop him. Without thinking twice, he reached into his pocket and pulled out some cash. "I want to buy her a pair of shoes and some food for her family," he said firmly. The old man raised an eyebrow, genuinely surprised but slightly wary. "I do," Thomas replied, the decision solidified in his heart. With a determined heart, he walked back over to Lily. She was still sitting quietly, absorbed in her doll as if it were the treasure of the earth. "Lily, I have an idea," he said, crouching before her once more. Her gaze flickered up, uncertainty lingering around the edges of her expression. She asked, her voice a whisper of hope. He asked. In that moment, time seemed to stand still. Her eyes widened, glimmering like stars on a clear night. "Really? Yes, absolutely," he replied with a smile. The look on her face was priceless, a blend of disbelief and pure joy, radiating warmth that swirled around them like golden sunlight. "I am," he assured her, standing and offering his hand. As they stepped outside, the sun bathed them in warmth and hope. A gentle breeze danced around them, carrying with it the laughter of children playing nearby. For Lily, this moment felt like a dream, a glimmer of light cutting through the shadows that had always loomed over her. As they walked to the shop, Thomas couldn't help but share stories of his travels. He spoke of mountains reaching up to kiss the sky, rivers that shimmered like jewels, and towns where kindness flowed like water. With each story, he watched Lily's spirit rise, her laughter mingling with his as they strolled side by side. Finally, they reached the shoe store, a quaint little shop that smelled of leather and new beginnings. The bell jingled as they entered, announcing their arrival. Brightly colored shoes lined the walls like a rainbow waiting to be discovered. "Pick any pair you want, Lily," Thomas said, his heart swelling with anticipation. Lily stood there, her little hands clasped nervously. She asked, almost in disbelief. He insisted, encouraging her to step further into the store. Her eyes darted around, taking in the choices. And then it happened. She spotted them bright red sneakers with shiny white laces. Her mouth fell open in awe, and Thomas could see her imagination light up. She asked, her voice trembling with excitement. He replied, grinning from ear to ear at the joy radiating from her. As she slipped on the sneakers, her face transformed. The shoes fit perfectly, as if they were made just for her. She rose, and with every step, it was like the weight of the world lifted. She was no longer just the girl without shoes. She was a girl filled with possibility, ready to chase dreams. Lily exclaimed, bouncing on her toes. "You definitely can," Thomas laughed, the sound rich with genuine happiness. Once outside, Lily couldn't resist bouncing her way down the sidewalk. She shouted, her eyes sparkling brighter than the sun, but the adventure wasn't over yet. "Let's grab your family some food," Thomas reminded her, taking her hand once again. Together, they walked to the grocery store nearby, the excitement bubbling between them. With every item they selected fresh fruits, bread, and vegetables. Lily's joy grew contagious. She kept saying, her heart bursting with gratitude. Thomas couldn't help but feel a sense of purpose swell within him. Each bag they filled held more than just food. It carried hope, dignity, and compassion. Once the shopping was done, they made their way back through the town. Little did they know their simple gestures would reach further than they could imagine. Thomas's heart swelled as he watched Lily skip alongside him, laughter ringing out like the sweetest melody. When they finally returned to the general store, Mr. Jenkins looked up in surprise. He couldn't believe the transformation before his eyes. He asked, his voice tinged with admiration. Thomas said proudly, gesturing to Lily. Mr. Jenkins smiled wide. "That's wonderful, but you've done more than just buy some shoes." Lily beamed, clutching her new shoes and groceries tightly. She exclaimed, her innocence shining brilliantly. In the following days, Thomas continued his journey through the town, but he carried the memory of that day with him, the girl at the general store, and the impact that kind gesture had made. He had changed Lily's life, but in return, she transformed his perspective on giving. As days turned into weeks, news spread around town about what Thomas had done. People began to gather more often, sharing meals, stories, and support, breaking down the walls of indifference that had stood for far too long. Lily, with her bright red shoes, emerged as a beacon of light. No longer just a girl without shoes, she became a symbol of hope, reminding everyone around her that kindness could shift the world. She began helping Mr. Jenkins organize food drives, encouraging other children to join in. Thomas had come into town as a traveler, but he left with more than he could have ever imagined. The simple act of buying a pair of shoes had created a ripple effect that united a community. As he traveled onward, he carried the spirit of that small town in his heart, the lessons learned, the lives touched, and the reminder that no matter how small the actions might seem, the impact could travel far beyond what anyone can see. Back in the little town, Lily stood taller, her bare feet behind her, stepping confidently into her new life. With every stride in her red sneakers, she carried with her the weight of opportunity, determination, and love, a powerful reminder of the kindness that had forever changed her world. And to think it all started with a simple question from a stranger. A crisp autumn breeze swept through the small town of Willow Creek, rustling the leaves as they danced along the uneven sidewalks. In the heart of this town stood a general store, worn but welcoming, with its wooden door creaking open as if inviting both customers and stories to share its space. On this particular day, a young girl named Lily sat on the wooden floor, playing quietly with a ragged doll. Her small feet were bare, the dirt caking around her toes, a testament to long afternoons spent roaming the nearby fields and streets. Lily looked around the store, her eyes sparkling with curiosity yet shadowed by a hint of sadness. Other children rushed in and out, their laughter echoing against the walls, their shoes bright and new, but Lily was different. She was used to feeling the rough ground beneath her feet, the cool earth reminding her of what she didn't have. As she played with her doll, she couldn't help but wonder what it would be like to wear shoes like the other kids. That day, a traveler named Thomas walked into the general store. He was a tall man with a kind face, his eyes reflecting the struggles and stories of the roads he had traveled. The warm scent of baked goods and fresh coffee filled the air, but it was Lily who caught his attention. There she sat, alone in her corner of the world, wrapped up in her imagination. He approached her slowly, aware of the fragile bubble of quiet she occupied. "Hey there," he asked gently, kneeling down so they were eye to eye. "Lily," she replied, her voice barely a whisper, as if she feared her name might break the spell of their moment. "Nice to meet you, Lily," Thomas asked, genuinely curious. Lily's gaze dropped to the floor, and a moment of silence hung heavy in the air. "I don't have any," she said, the weight of her words pressing upon them both. It was a simple statement, yet it lingered between them, carrying the burden of her reality. Thomas felt a surge of protectiveness and empathy wave over him. How could a little girl like her be left without something so basic? He thought of times he had taken such things for granted. It struck him with clarity her bare feet weren't just a misfortune. They were a symbol of what too many in the world endure, a reminder of the gap between those who have and those who do not. As he wandered through the aisles of the store, his mind raced. He picked up a few items, a loaf of bread, some fruit, and a set of candy bars that he tossed into his basket. But his heart wasn't truly in his shopping, it kept circling back to Lily. He noticed how every glance she cast toward the other kids brought a flicker of longing, as if she could feel their joy but was kept at bay by circumstances she didn't choose. Returning to the counter, Thomas felt compelled to take action. He met Mr. Jenkins, the old man who ran the store, a solemn expression etched on his face. He asked, nodding towards Lily. The storekeeper sighed, looking over his glasses. "Yeah, that's Lily. Her family's fallen on hard times." "Shoes, food," Thomas nodded, a determination rising within him. He suggested, feeling bold in the face of the injustice Lily faced. Mr. Jenkins raised an eyebrow, surprised but somewhat skeptical. "It's not just shoes she needs, they're going to need help with food too." "I want to help," Thomas asked, his tone resolute. Deep inside, he knew it wasn't just about shoes. It was about dignity, about showing Lily that she was cared for, that she mattered. Mr. Jenkins studied Thomas for a moment, an understanding flickering in his eyes. He nodded, slowly warming to the idea of this stranger trying to make a difference. With a plan in motion, Thomas returned to Lily. She looked up when he approached, her eyes widening with curiosity. "Lily," he started, crouching to meet her gaze. She blinked, clearly not comprehending the gravity of what he was saying. She hesitated, glancing at the ground as if it would confirm that it was all a dream. "Yes," he confirmed, his smile radiating warmth. Lily's expression shifted from disbelief to sparkling joy. "Really?" She clapped her hands in excitement. Thomas laughed, finding delight in her enthusiasm. Her eyes lit up like stars, and the smile that spread across her face was infectious. "Thank you," she exclaimed, her voice now infused with genuine hope. Stepping out of the store, they were greeted by the crisp air and the golden light of the setting sun. Thomas took her small hand in his, and together they ventured towards the shoe store. As they walked, he shared snippets of his life, stories of his travels, the people he had met, and the places he had seen. It was as if their worlds were colliding, one lifting the other. Arriving at the shoe store, Thomas felt a rush of excitement. The air buzzed with possibility. The bell over the door chimed, announcing their entrance. Rows upon rows of shoes lined the walls, their colors vibrant and full of life. "Pick any pair you want, Lily," Thomas encouraged her, watching her eyes dart across the shelves. Gazing around in wonder, Lily finally spotted the pair that would mark this moment forever. Bright red sneakers, perfect for a girl ready to chase her dreams. She asked, her voice a blend of hope and disbelief. Thomas replied, his heart blooming with anticipation. As she tried them on, the world around them seemed to vanish. With each new step in those shoes, Lily radiated joy. "Look at me," she laughed, bouncing on her toes, the shoes almost magical in her eyes. "They're perfect for you," he said, his heart swelling at the sight. Finally satisfied, they stepped back into the street. He asked, still watching her joy blossom. "Food," she cried, pulling him toward the grocery store nearby. Her excitement reminded him of childhood dreams and the beauty of simple pleasures. They entered the store, the sounds of chatter and clinking carts surrounding them. As they navigated the aisles, Thomas felt his heart swell with every item they picked: apples, bread, vegetables, and even a few treats. Each selection felt like stitching a small but significant patch on the quilt of Lily's life. "This is for my family," she said, her voice filled with purpose as she carefully placed each item into their basket. After a fruitful shopping spree, they left the store, the bags heavy with hope and sustenance. As they walked back down the streets of Willow Creek, Lily's laughter seemed to weave a melody that stitched the town together, creating connections among families and individuals who had been just passing through life. When they returned to the general store, Mr. Jenkins looked absolutely stunned. He asked, watching the joy radiate from Lily, "Together we did," she exclaimed, showing off her new shoes with the pride of a conqueror. Her laughter danced in the air, echoing the change that had begun to ripple through the community. But it wasn't just about shoes or food. What floated in the air that day was a revived spirit of kindness. Thomas felt a swelling in his chest as he witnessed the effect of simple compassion. The act of buying a pair of shoes had sparked goodwill and gratitude among strangers. Days turned into weeks, and the change in Lily became palpable. The girl, once overshadowed by circumstances, now stood taller, not just because she had new shoes, but because she felt seen and valued. Other kids began to notice her, reaching out to play and share stories. Encouraged by her newfound confidence, Lily took on a leadership role in her little community. She started helping Mr. Jenkins organize food drives and gatherings to support families who were struggling. Her laughter transformed from a solitary sound into a chorus of joy that echoed through the town. Meanwhile, Thomas continued his traveling, but every now and then he'd think back to that small town, the little girl, and how a single act of kindness could change lives. He often wondered how Lily was doing, hoping that the spark they created together had ignited something deeper within her. Then one crisp morning, some months later, he found himself back on the road that led to Willow Creek. The familiarity of the surroundings welcomed him like an old friend. As he approached the general store, he felt his heart race with anticipation. Drawing closer, he noticed a small crowd gathered outside. Curious, he navigated through the throng and caught sight of a bustling event organized by none other than Lily. She stood on a small stage set up in front of the store, her red sneakers gleaming in the sunlight. She shouted, her voice ringing through the air with newfound confidence. "We're raising money to help families in our town." Thomas's heart swelled with pride. He watched as she directed the volunteers, organizing food collections and rallying the community to come together. In that moment, he realized that Lily had grown into a young leader, transforming her own story into something far more than just her struggles. It was then that the townspeople noticed him standing at the edge of the crowd, and one by one they turned to welcome him back with smiles and waves. He stepped forward, greeted by warmth and gratitude. He called, his voice cutting through the celebrations. She turned, her eyes widening in surprise, then breaking into an uncontainable smile. "Mr. Thomas." She rushed over, her sneakers pounding against the ground like the joyful beat of her heart. He marveled, his eyes glistening as he took in the scene. She exclaimed, hugging him tightly, as if the warmth of their connection was a balm to her soul. In that moment of embrace, Thomas realized something profound. Helping others wasn't just about aiding their immediate needs, it was about igniting their potential and letting them fly. Lily had not only walked into a pair of shoes that day, but she had also stepped into the beautiful light of possibilities fueled by kindness. As the festivities continued, the laughter, the joy, and the community spirit echoed through the streets of Willow Creek, a living testament to the power of one small gesture. Each of them was bound by a common thread of compassion, forever changed by a girl who had learned to run on her own 2 feet, her red sneakers leaving a trail of hope behind her. And as the sun set, casting a golden glow over the town, Thomas knew his journey had intertwined with Lily, creating a legacy that would ripple through time when grounded in the belief that kindness could indeed change the world. The door of the general store swung open, and a chill gust of wind followed a man named David, whipping through the dusty room like a restless spirit. He was just passing through the small town of Maplewood, his boots scuffing against the wooden floor. The comforting scents of flour and freshly baked bread hung in the air, but among the usual chatter and daily bustle, one particular sight caught his eye and turned his heart heavy. In the corner of the store sat a girl named Sophie. She couldn't have been more than 8 years old, with tangled hair that framed her face and wide, hopeful eyes that seemed to hold worlds of stories. But what struck David the most was her bare feet resting on the cold, hard floor. The sight of her small, dirty soles told a tale of hardship that felt both heartbreaking and all too real. David watched as other kids scampered in and out, their faces lit up with glee, their shoes new and shiny. Sophie's gaze remained low, focused on a worn doll she held tightly as if it were her only friend. He moved closer, his heart racing at the thought of the unspoken struggles that child must face every day. David asked, crouching down to meet her eyes. "Sophie," she replied softly, glancing up at him, uncertainty blending with curiosity. "Hi, Sophie," he asked, gently probing. Her small face turned solemn and she played with the doll's hair. "I can't afford them," she whispered, her voice barely a breath. Those words hung in the air, heavy with meaning. In a world where most kids took shoes for granted, for Sophie, they were a distant dream. David felt a wave of sadness wash over him, fueled by a combination of sympathy and determination. She shouldn't have to suffer just because of circumstances beyond her control. As he walked through the aisles, trying to focus on his own shopping, thoughts of Sophie consumed him. He picked up bread, some candy, and a few other items, but every step bore the weight of the reality he wanted to change. It dawned on him suddenly how easily he took his own comforts for granted. Shoes, they were just shoes. But for Sophie, they represented warmth, security, and a childhood filled with freedom. He reached the counter where Mr. Johnson, the elderly storekeeper, stood. David asked, nodding toward Sophie. Mr. Johnson sighed, the wrinkles on his face deepening as he looked over at her. "Yeah, that's Sophie. Her family's struggling. There are times they can hardly afford food, let alone shoes." A burning determination ignited within David. The storekeeper raised an eyebrow, surprised at the stranger's offer. "You don't know the half of it. A pair of shoes isn't just about warmth, it's about dignity too." I'm willing to help. They deserve a shot at something better, at feeling normal, David replied, his voice steady and sincere. Mr. Johnson seemed to weigh his words. All right, I'll support whatever you decide, he said quietly, a spark of hope lighting his demeanor. With a sense of urgency surging through him, David made his way back to Sophie, who had now returned to playing quietly with her doll. He crouched down, brushing aside any hesitation. For a moment, Sophie blinked in disbelief, her large eyes searching his face for signs that he might be joking. She gasped, her voice filled with both hope and skepticism. Yes, you can pick any pair you want, David assured her, the warmth of his heart enveloping both of them. A soft smile broke across her face, lighting up the dimness in her eyes. She asked, nearly bouncing with excitement. Absolutely, he said, standing and extending his hand toward her. Sophie grabbed it, pulling herself up, and they shared a triumphant moment, their palms clasped together like a promise. As they stepped outside, the brisk air danced around them, and Sophie's laughter rang like music. Thank you, she exclaimed, skipping along beside him, excitement brewing in her innocent heart. They strolled toward the nearby shoe store, David losing himself in the joy sparking from Sophie's every step. She regaled him with stories of her adventures, her laughter infectiously sweet. Along the way, they talked about everything from favorite colors to her imagination filled with heroes and villains, dreams and wishes. Through her words, David found himself entranced by the strength buried beneath her innocent exterior. Once they reached the shoe store, David felt a rush of anticipation coursing through him. The bell chimed above the door as they entered, revealing rows and rows of shoes in every color and style imaginable. Sophie's eyes widened, sparkling at the sight. David reminded her, grinning down at her. She took a deep breath, her eyes darting around as if the shoes were treasures sparkling under a magical light. Finally, she spotted them bright red sneakers perched on a shelf like tiny beacons of hope. She asked, her voice trembling from excitement. David replied, his heart swelling. As she slipped on the shoes, it was as though a wave of magic wrapped around the room. She stood tall, her feet adorned with bright red. Suddenly, she felt like she could conquer the world. Look at me, she giggled, racing around the store in her new shoes. David laughed, delighted to see her so full of life. Sophie, you're a blur. He cheered, clapping his hands. Once they had celebrated her new shoes, it was time to think about her family. What good were the shoes if they had no food to eat? David guided her toward the grocery store nearby, and Sophie's excitement only grew. Together, they filled a cart with fresh fruits and vegetables, bread, and any treats that caught her eye. David asked as the cart began to fill. As they gathered food together, Sophie's infectious joy caught the attention of other shoppers. They watched in awe as a little girl who had once seemed so small was transforming right before their eyes. Sophie chirped, her cheeks flushed with happiness. In that moment, it became clear to David that he wasn't just taking Sophie shopping. He was igniting a spark in her, a feeling of worth, a sense of possibility that had been buried under layers of hardship. After filling their cart, they returned to the general store. Mr. Johnson greeted them at the counter, his eyes watering at the sight before him. He said with a mix of disbelief and admiration. David proclaimed, pointing to Sophie, who bounced on her toes, unable to contain her excitement. When she placed the groceries on the counter, Mr. Johnson's smile broadened. He said, beaming at her. As David paid for everything, he couldn't help but feel he had done something monumental, not for himself, but for a girl who deserved much more than what life had dealt her. He was reminded of how small acts can intertwine lives in ways that are sometimes impossible to measure. After they left the store, Sophie turned to David with the widest smile he had ever seen. She exclaimed, joy bubbling over in her voice. I'm really glad. Just remember, you can do anything if you set your heart to it, David encouraged her. The simple message carried considerable weight. I will, she replied, her eyes gleaming with possibility. As they walked back towards the exit, Sophie's laughter mixed with the wind, weaving a sound so light and free, it seemed to cast off all the shadows that had clouded her past. Weeks passed, and David continued his journey. He found himself thinking often of Sophie, full of fire and ambition. The small town of Maplewood had cast a light in his heart, reminding him that the most significant impact often begins with a small act of kindness. Meanwhile, in that same town, Sophie flourished like a flower in spring. Those red shoes were much more than just footwear. They had become a symbol of her newfound confidence. She approached the world with a fresh perspective, and with every step, she grew more independent. She wore her red shoes with pride, often assisting Mr. Johnson in the general store, where she encouraged other children to bring their parents to help those in need. With each donation or food drive, Sophie lifted her community around her, and her spirit became contagious. One bright afternoon, as she stood behind the counter of the general store, she spotted a familiar figure approaching through the door. It was David. As he stepped inside, it felt as if the sun had risen just for this moment. He called, his voice carrying a warmth that met her like a gentle embrace. She rushed to him, her heart racing, joy erupting from within her. Mr. David, she exclaimed, pulling him into a hug that conveyed everything she felt. It's so good to see you. "I had to come back and see how you were doing," he said, kneeling to meet her eye level. "I've been helping a lot," she beamed, her voice filled with pride. David noticed how much she had grown. Her confidence shone brighter than ever. He could see that the girl he had once met had transformed into a young leader, bringing change to her community. He asked, genuinely curious. She said, her voice bubbling with excitement. David felt his heart swell. "That's incredible, Sophie." "You're making a real difference," he replied warmly. As they chatted, people around the store began to greet David, sharing thanks for what he had initiated with that simple act of kindness. They spoke of the changes in their town, the way Sophie had emerged as a beacon of hope. Each acknowledgement wove an intricate web of connection, and in that moment, he realized the true power of compassion, how one small moment could echo through the fabric of a community. Later, Sophie led him outside where the food drive was in full swing. Families gathered, smiling and exchanging treats, laughter floating through the air like a sweet serenade. As they worked together, David couldn't help but witness the good that had blossomed from his initial act of kindness. The sun began to set, painting the sky in hues of orange and gold. It was a breathtaking canvas, and standing there, surrounded by a community bound by care and compassion, David found himself reflecting on the simple power of connection. Sophie had not only grown, she had helped others rise, striding confidently forward, her red shoes a testament to her journey from hardship to hope. At that moment, David realized he hadn't merely bought a girl a pair of shoes. He had helped pave the way for a young leader to emerge, reminding everyone that kindness could indeed change the world, one small step at a time. And as the twilight deepened, the laughter and joy of the gathering echoed in the air, a beautiful reminder that, like the ripples of a stone cast into still water, every act of kindness resonates far beyond what one can see. The sun dipped low over the small town of Maplewood, casting an amber glow that painted the streets in warm hues. As the day wound down, a gentle wind rustled the leaves, while the distant laughter of children echoed through the air. But hidden amidst that joy was a poignant reality, a reality that came to a head in the little general store at the end of Main Street. Inside the store, shelves lined with jars of jams, fresh produce, and colorful snacks held a myriad of ordinary delights, creating a comforting scene. But in one corner, a girl sat alone on the floor. Her name was Emily. She was barely 8 years old, with tousled brown hair and bright eyes that sparkled with imagination. Yet what caught the eye was her bare feet, resting against the cool wood, a stark contrast to the vibrant world around her. Emily's gaze darted to the door every time it opened, watching the other children rush in, their laughter trailing behind them like a symphony, each child sporting shiny new shoes. She felt that familiar pang of longing in her chest. While everyone else jumped, skipped, and danced into the store, Emily was left to quietly clutch her favorite ragged doll, her heart heavy with unfulfilled wishes. One day, a man named Jack stepped into the general store. He was tall with a friendly demeanor, and the warmth in his eyes radiated hopefulness. As he perused the aisles, Jack couldn't help but notice Emily. The starkness of her bare feet struck him. A jolt of something unspoken stirred within him as he marveled at her spirit amidst the stark reality of her situation. Jack asked, kneeling down to her level. "Emily," she replied, her voice a soft whisper, but her eyes reflected a curiosity that was more powerful than the words themselves. "Nice to meet you, Emily." He inquired gently, knowing the answer but hoping to hear it from her. She looked down at the ground, a cloud of shyness billowing around her. "I don't have any," she admitted, the air around them thick with unspoken truths. Jack felt a pang in his heart. How could a child be so vulnerable, so exposed to the world? It was a moment that anchored itself in Jack's memory. He thought of how easily he had taken such things for granted, how he had never once experienced a day without shoes. Just the thought of it made him ache. As he continued his shopping, Jack's mind lingered on that little girl and her bare feet. When he reached the counter, he met Mrs. Thompson, the shopkeeper, a kind-hearted woman with wrinkles that told 1,000 stories. Jack asked, motioning toward Emily, who was now playing with her doll with a sad smile. Mrs. Thompson nodded, her expression becoming serious. "That's Emily. Her family falls on hard times, shoes, food." A fire ignited within Jack. He suggested, feeling bold in his conviction. Mrs. Thompson raised her eyebrows, both surprised and touched. "You don't know what you're getting into. It's not just shoes she needs, it's more than that." "I want to," Jack stated firmly. With his heart racing, Jack returned to Emily, who flicked her gaze toward him, curiosity illuminating her face. He asked with a gentle smile, her eyes widened, disbelief washing over her face. "No, I'm serious." "You can choose any pair you want," Jack confirmed, enthusiasm seeping into his voice. She blinked, processing his words in slow motion, then gasped. She squeaked, her face lighting up with pure excitement. "Of course," Jack exclaimed, holding out his hand to her. Emily hesitated for a moment, her innocence shining through her uncertainty. But as she took his hand, a smile broke across her face like a secret being revealed. Together, they headed out into the golden light. As they walked, the breeze danced around them, carrying the warmth of community and hope. Their laughter stitched itself into the fabric of the day, weaving a bond that transcended the boundaries of their lives. Emily spoke animatedly about her doll's adventures, and Jack listened, enthralled by her imagination and spirit. He soon arrived at the shoe store, a quaint little place with bells that jingled cheerfully as they stepped inside. Rows of shoes lined the walls in every color imaginable, each one waiting to be chosen, waiting to tell a story. "Pick any pair you want, Emily," Jack said, his heart racing at the sight of her joy bubbling over. Her eyes glimmered with possibilities as she surveyed the shelves, and there in a bright display she spotted them, red sneakers with white laces. She asked, bouncing on her heels with excitement. Jack laughed, feeling the spark of joy radiate from her. As she slipped into the shoes, a transformation unfolded before him. Emily stood taller and prouder, her eyes shining with delight. She took off running around the store, giggles spilling from her lips like precious gems. She shouted, dashing through the aisles, her laughter echoing against the walls. Jack called after her, reveling in her exuberance. He'd never seen her spirit shine like this, and it filled him with warmth. After trying on the shoes, Emily's smile widened. "They fit perfectly," she cried, barely able to contain herself. As they left the shoe store, their hearts brimmed with joy, but Jack felt an urge to dig deeper. He asked, turning toward the nearby grocery store. Her eyes sparkled with understanding. "They need food. We don't have much at home," she murmured, the gravity of her words pulling at his heart. He exclaimed, and her face lit up again, filling Jack with such happiness that he felt it could burst forth into the skies. Together they wandered through the grocery aisles, filling a cart with fresh fruits, vegetables, and treats. He found joy in her laughter as she picked out her favorite snacks, her excitement bubbling over as they gathered food not just for her, but for her whole family. She chimed happily. Jack could see how proud she was to help her family, her spirit radical and vibrant, powerful in its own right. When the cart was full, they approached the checkout, and the store clerk's eyes widened as she recognized Emily. She asked, a smile forming on her lips. Emily beamed. "No, it's for my family," she exclaimed, lifting her foot to show off her new red sneakers. Jack felt his heart swell with pride as he rifled through his wallet to pay for it all. It was a small act in the grand scheme of life, but for Emily and her family it would mean the world. After exiting the store, Emily turned to Jack. "This has been the best day ever," she said, bouncing in place. "I'm glad I could help," Jack responded, knowing that this moment held significance far beyond what they could see. In Emily's joy, he saw the power of compassion, the threads connecting them woven with care. As the days turned into weeks, Jack's journey continued, but the memory of that day stayed with him. He often thought about Emily, imagining her running through the streets with her red shoes, laughter trailing behind her like a comet's tail. Each time he reflected on their brief encounter, he felt the warmth of her spirit and the importance of kindness echoing in his heart. In Maplewood, things began to change for Emily as well. She wore her new shoes every day, and with them came a newfound confidence. No longer just a girl without shoes, she was transforming into a girl filled with possibility and ambition. As time went on, she began helping Mr. Dennis, the owner of the general store, arranging food drives and school events. She rallied the kids in the neighborhood, inspiring everyone around her to help families in need. Emily blossomed, her laughter ringing out like music, spreading joy as she had always wanted to. One sunny day, as Emily was sorting donations outside the store, she spotted a familiar figure approaching. It was Jack, and her heart raced with excitement. "Mister," she shouted, running toward him, bright red sneakers flying along the pavement. "Emily," he exclaimed, kneeling down to meet her. "I'm helping with a food drive just like you," she said proudly, the glow of her heart reflected in her eyes. "Look at you," he praised, pride swelling in his chest. With that spark of recognition, others around began to notice Jack too, sharing heartfelt stories of how Emily had rallied the community together. Jack felt alive with joy as he saw how one small act had snowballed into inspiration for so many. As the sun set that day, casting beautiful hues across the sky, Jack realized he hadn't just bought a pair of shoes, he had sparked a movement. Emily had transformed not only her own life, but also ignited a flame of kindness within her community. Among the laughter and joy shared between neighbors that evening, Jack knew the simple act of carrying the gift of one pair of shoes had forged bonds that would last a lifetime. He learned that true wealth isn't measured by possessions, but by the impact you leave on others. Emily stood taller than ever that day, her journey just beginning. In her vibrant red sneakers, she learned that kindness could echo through time, creating ripples that would reach far beyond the horizon. And in that quaint little town, a powerful truth unfolded before them. Caring for one another can change everything, one heart at a time. Bell above the door jingled sharply as a man named Ryan stepped into the small general store nestled at the corner of Maple Street. His eyes adjusted to the dim light inside, and he felt like he had stepped into another world, a world filled with warmth and the comforting smell of fresh bread and spices. But what truly captured his gaze was a little girl sitting cross-legged on the wooden floor, a scruffy doll clutched tightly to her chest. Her name was Mia, and she was no more than 7 years old. Her hair was a wild mop of curls, and her cheeks were dusted with dirt from playing outside. Most striking of all were her bare feet, resting on the cold, hard floor, each toe grimy and exposed to the chill. Ryan's heart sank as he noticed the kids outside the store, their laughter ringing through the air like silver bells, each one sporting bright, shiny shoes. How could a child live without such a basic necessity? He felt a flush of sadness wash over him as he approached the girl. Ryan asked, crouching down to her level. "Mia," she replied softly, her voice barely above a whisper, as if she didn't want to disturb the world around her. "Nice to meet you, Mia," he probed gently, wanting to understand her story. She looked down, her big brown eyes filled with a mix of embarrassment and resignation. "I don't have any money for them," she murmured, her small shoulders slumping as if the weight of her circumstances bore down on her. Those words hit Ryan harder than a punch. He glanced around the store at the shelves stocked high with goods and realized that a simple pair of shoes could change everything for Mia. The injustice of it stung, igniting a fire within him. While browsing the aisles, picking up a few items for himself, Ryan couldn't shake the image of Mia sitting there, vulnerable and alone. Each step brought thoughts of her quiet strength and the stark reality of her situation. He checked out the necessities he needed, but his mind kept drifting back to her bare feet and the harshness of the world that awaited her outside. Reaching the counter, he came face to face with Mr. Thompson, the kindly owner of the store. The old man watched him with knowing eyes. He asked, his voice rich with experience. "Yeah," Ryan replied, trying to mask the anger that simmered inside him. Mr. Thompson sighed deeply, rubbing his forehead. "That little girl and her family have fallen on tough times. They struggle to make ends meet." "I want to help," Ryan declared suddenly, the words escaping before he could filter them. Mr. Thompson raised an eyebrow, surprised by the spontaneity of Ryan's offer. "You realize it's not just shoes she needs, right?" "I want to help them with both," Ryan insisted, determination coursing through him. With a small nod of approval, Mr. Thompson's demeanor softened. "All right then." Fueled by a sense of purpose, Ryan turned back towards the girl. Mia was still playing quietly with her doll, a small smile tugging at her lips as she spoke to it softly. "Mia," he said gently, kneeling before her. Her eyes widened in disbelief, a flicker of hope igniting in her expression. "Really?" she asked, her voice trembling with excitement. "Absolutely." "You can pick any pair you want," Ryan assured her, feeling his heart swell as her grin widened. She shrieked, her excitement bubbling over into laughter. Ryan replied, extending his hand. Mia took it, a gleam of trust shining in her eyes, and together they stepped out into the fresh air. As they walked toward the shoe store, the breeze danced around them like a celebration. Mia's laughter floated through the air as she skipped alongside Ryan, her spirit uncontainable. Along the way, she shared tales of her doll's adventures, her eyes sparkling with imagination. Arriving at the shoe store, Ryan felt a rush of excitement as they entered. The bell above the door chimed a cheerful greeting, and rows of colorful shoes lined the walls, waiting for a little girl to call them home. "Choose any pair you want, Mia," Ryan encouraged, watching her eyes widen with wonder. With a gasp, she spotted the shiny red sneakers tucked on a shelf. She practically squealed, pointing eagerly. Ryan laughed as she hopped down the aisle, her excitement lighting up the room. As Mia slipped on the shoes, the transformation was remarkable. She stood a little taller, as if the shoes were not just physical objects, but wings that could propel her into the sky. The moment she began to run to sprint with pure joy and abandon, Ryan felt his heart lift. "Look at me," she shouted, her laughter ringing through the store like a melody. Ryan cheered back, overwhelmed with joy. For the first time in a long time, he realized how a simple act of kindness could ignite such happiness in someone so deserving. After trying on the shoes, Mia beamed with pride. "Thank you," she exclaimed, practically bouncing off the walls, but now it was time to think about her family. Ryan asked, glancing around the store. Her expression turned serious. "They're always hungry," she confessed, a shadow crossing her face. Determined to make a difference, they headed to the grocery store nearby. Mia's excitement soared once again as they entered, and Ryan felt his heart swell at her joy. Together, they filled a basket with fresh fruit, vegetables, and a few small treats. She asked with wide eyes. Ryan replied, smiling at her enthusiasm. With each item they added to the basket, Mia's happiness radiated like sunlight breaking through clouds. She even insisted on picking out a chocolate bar. She proclaimed, and Ryan could hardly refuse. As they made their way back to the general store, Ryan couldn't help but think about how profound this experience had become. Not only had he helped give a girl a pair of shoes, but he was also bringing food to a family in need. It was momentous. Back at the counter, Mr. Thompson greeted them with a knowing smile. He said, glancing at Mia, who was practically bouncing on her feet. Ryan replied, his heart full. Mia approached Mr. Thompson, eyes shining. She declared proudly, "You're already a hero, Mia," Mr. Thompson said, grinning from ear to ear. As Ryan paid for their haul, his heart surged with warmth. Mia clutched her new shoes, looking up at him with pure admiration. She exclaimed, wrapping her tiny arms around his waist in a hug. "Thank you, Mia, you're the best too," Ryan replied, feeling honored to be part of this moment. Stepping outside, the sun had dipped lower, casting a golden hue across the town. The air was filled with the laughter of children playing, and in that moment it felt like everything was just right in the world. In the days that followed, Ryan continued his journey, but thoughts of Mia lingered in his heart. He envisioned her running through the streets with her new shoes, laughter escaping as she forgot about her struggles, even if just for a moment. Meanwhile, back in Maplewood, Mia flourished. With her newfound shoes, she held her head high, gaining confidence and spreading joy wherever she went. Other children began to notice her swagger, her laughter, and her spirit, drawing her into their games. One day, as she played outside, Mia felt empowered. She proudly announced to her friends, showing off her red sneakers. The other kids cheered, and she could feel the warmth of acceptance washing over her. As weeks passed, she began volunteering at the general store, helping Mr. Thompson organize items and greet customers. She discovered that she enjoyed engaging with others, enjoyed seeing their smiles, and knowing she could contribute to the community. On a sunny afternoon, while arranging boxes in the store, she spotted a familiar face in the distance. It was Ryan. Her heart soared. "Mister," she shouted, racing toward him, her red sneakers propelling her forward. "Hey Mia, look at you," Ryan exclaimed, kneeling to meet her excited gaze. She beamed, hardly able to contain her joy, his heart filled with pride. "That's amazing." Mia jumped up and down, recounting stories of the food drives she had helped organize, the happy families they had fed, and how they played games each week at the park. It was clear she was not just surviving, she was thriving. Just then, Mr. Thompson stepped in, catching sight of them. He said, clapping him on the back, "Our little Mia here has been a wonder." Ryan felt a warmth settle in his chest. He had merely intended to help when he bought that pair of shoes, but he had catalyzed something much larger than himself, a ripple of kindness that was transforming lives. As they chatted, Ryan took a moment to reflect on how one simple act could spread hope and warmth. Mia was a living testament to the power of compassion, and standing there, he realized how small gestures could carry immense weight. Days turned into months, and soon, the town of Maplewood had transformed. Mia led initiatives to help the community, inspiring others with her heart and enthusiasm. She had become a beacon of hope, a girl who had gone from longing for shoes to leading a movement of kindness. On a particularly warm day, Ryan returned to Maplewood once more. As he walked through the streets, laughter filled the air, mingling with the scents of fresh pies and blooming flowers. He made his way back to the general store, where the familiar bell chimed a warm welcome. "Mr. Mia called," spotting him from across the room. She rushed over, her red shoes gleaming in the sunlight. "You won't believe what we've done. I couldn't be prouder of you, Mia," Ryan said, enveloping her in a warm hug. As the sun dipped below the horizon, painting the sky in brilliant hues, Ryan watched the community gather. Families came together, laughter floated on the air, and for one night they broke bread, shared stories, and celebrated together. It was a beautiful reminder that small acts of kindness have the power to create lasting change. And as Ryan looked at Mia now, a confident leader full of warmth and compassion, he knew they had both learned an invaluable lesson. In that little town, every pair of shoes meant more than comfort. They represented dreams, unity, and the very essence of humanity. Together, they had proven that compassion could ripple through a community, transforming lives and building connections that would last a lifetime. The late afternoon sun hung low in the sky, casting a warm glow over the small town of Willow Creek. It was the kind of day that painted the world in golden hues, where laughter echoed from the playground and the sweet smell of freshly baked goods wafted from the general store. Yet in the corner of the store where shadows gathered, a girl named Lucy sat with bare feet resting against the cold floor, her toes streaked with dirt. She was lost in her own world, cradling a worn-out doll, her only companion. Lucy was around 8 years old, with messy hair and large, expressive eyes that revealed a depth far beyond her years. As she watched other children from a distance, their shoes bright and shiny, a sense of longing washed over her. She could hear their laughter, but she also felt the weight of her own quiet solitude. Just then, the bell above the door jingled, catching her attention. A man walked in, a traveler named Mark, with kind eyes that seemed to hold stories of his own. He noticed Lucy immediately. She was hard to miss, sitting there alone while the world bustled around her. With a gentle smile, he approached her. "Hey there," he asked, kneeling down to her level. "Lucy," she replied softly, her voice barely rising above the noise of the store. "Nice to meet you, Lucy," he asked, a feeling of concern bubbling inside him. Her small face fell and she looked down at her feet, a sigh escaping her lips. "I don't have any," she whispered, staring at the ground as if it could swallow her shame. Mark felt a pang in his chest. Here was a little girl who didn't even have the basic comfort of shoes, while others around her took such things for granted. The injustice of it struck him deeply. As he wandered through the aisles, picking up a few essentials for his trip, his mind raced with thoughts of Lucy. Here she was, a child full of dreams and a heart brimming with potential, and yet she felt invisible. Mark couldn't bear the thought of her wanting for something so simple but so vital. He thought of how easily he had taken his own comforts for granted. When he reached the counter to check out, he met Mrs. Baker, the elderly shopkeeper, with a warm smile but a heavy heart. Mark asked, gesturing towards Lucy, still sitting in the corner. "Ah, that's Lucy," Mrs. Baker replied, her smile fading slightly. "Her family has been struggling for a while now. Shoes, food. I want to help her," Mark said suddenly, feeling a surge of purpose. "What if I bought her a pair of shoes?" Mrs. Baker looked at him with a mix of surprise and admiration. "That's mighty generous of you, but you should know it's not just shoes she needs. It's about dignity too," she said softly. "I understand," Mark replied, strength seeping into his voice. Mrs. Baker nodded, her expression warming. With determination in his heart, Mark turned back to Lucy, who had now been watching him with wide eyes. He called. Her eyes widened in disbelief, and for a moment it was as if hope flickered in her chest. She asked, her voice trembling. "Yes, really, you can pick any pair you want," he encouraged, excitement bubbling in him. Lucy's face broke into a joyful grin. She shouted, one small hand flying up in delight. "All right then, let's go get those." Mark extended his hand to her and she took it, her small fingers enveloping his. They left the store, the sunlight spilling over them like golden confetti, illuminating a new world filled with possibilities. As they walked toward the shoe store just a block away, Lucy danced alongside him, her laughter like a sweet melody that made Mark's heart soar. He asked, genuinely curious. She replied, her eyes sparkling with imagination. "I think magic shoes sound perfect," Mark said, smiling down at her. When they reached the shoe store, a small, charming place that smelled of leather, Mark felt his excitement grow. The bell jingled as they stepped inside, and suddenly the world of choice opened up before them. Rows of colorful shoes lined the walls, each one gleaming under the bright lights. "Pick any pair you want, Lucy," Mark said, watching her excitement rise. Lucy's eyes darted around as if she were in a candy store, and then she spotted them, the bright red sneakers with white laces. She asked, her voice barely able to contain her exhilaration. Mark said, already envisioning the joy they would bring her. As she slipped on the red sneakers, her face transformed from caution to pure elation. She shouted, bouncing on her toes. Mark could hardly contain his laughter. "You look amazing," Lucy giggled, twirling in her new shoes as if the world had suddenly shifted around her. She no longer looked like the girl sitting alone in a corner. She looked vibrant and full of life. After celebrating her new shoes, Mark's thoughts shifted back to the reality waiting outside. "Lucy," he said, "what do you need for your family?" She pondered for a moment, then replied, "They like pasta." Mark grinned as they headed to the grocery store next door. Inside the bustling store, Lucy's excitement was contagious. With every item they gathered cans of spaghetti sauce, fresh pasta, a bag of apples. Her confidence bloomed. She repeated, her heart filled with purpose. Mark couldn't help but feel a sense of pride swelling within him. He was simply a man trying to do a good deed, but here he was witnessing the emergence of a young girl rising to embrace her role in the world. After filling their cart, they headed to the checkout. The clerk looked surprised to see Lucy, her wide eyes reflecting a mix of awe and warmth. She asked, and Lucy nodded enthusiastically. "Yes," she declared, her voice ringing out with pride. Mark felt his heart swell. He paid for the groceries, Lucy's new shoes safely tucked under her arm. As they left the store, Lucy turned to him, her face radiant. She exclaimed, "I'm happy to hear that. You deserve it," Mark replied, his smile brightening even more. As they walked back toward the general store hand in hand, the sun beamed down a little brighter and the world felt just a bit kinder. Over the following weeks, their lives took very different paths. Mark continued his journey, but he often found himself thinking about Lucy. He imagined her racing down the streets with her shiny red sneakers while he traversed new towns. The image stayed with him, a beautiful reminder of the impact of small gestures. Back in Willow Creek, Lucy blossomed. With each day in her new shoes, her confidence grew. She joined kids in playground games, no longer feeling like an outsider. The red sneakers had not only transformed her feet, but had also awakened her spirit. Before long, Lucy began volunteering at the general store, helping Mrs. Baker stock shelves and greet customers. She enjoyed being part of a community, finding joy in every interaction. Then one sunny afternoon, Lucy stood in front of the general store, her heart racing. She had organized a small bake sale to raise money for families in need. Word had spread and people from all around had shown up in support. As she sold cookies and small treats, her friends watched her, admiring her determination. That day they raised more money than she could have imagined. The joy that spread through the crowd was contagious, and so was Lucy's laughter. Just then she caught sight of a familiar figure walking toward her. It was Mark, returning to Willow Creek. Her heart leaped. "Mister," she shouted, dashing toward him, her red sneakers practically flying off the pavement. He called back, kneeling down to embrace her. She exclaimed, her face beaming with pride. Mark replied, feeling tears prick at the corners of his eyes. As they chatted about her accomplishments, it was clear that Lucy had blossomed into a young girl full of purpose and joy. Days turned into weeks, and as the seasons shifted, the bond between Lucy and Mark solidified. He found himself returning to Willow Creek more often, embodying the spirit of kindness that had sparked their initial connection. each visit filled with new adventures and inspiration. One late afternoon, as they prepared for another bake sale, Mark watched as Lucy gathered her friends. They shared giggles and stories, planning how to make their next event even bigger. In that moment, he realized how one small act of compassion had ignited a flame, creating ripples throughout the community. Mark asked Lucy softly, a hint of nostalgia in his voice. "I remember," she replied thoughtfully, her eyes reflecting a wisdom beyond her years. "But I also remember that you helped me." Mark felt his heart swell again, marveling at how a simple act had sparked not only major change in Lucy's world, but also in the world around her. Then one day, as they prepared for another bake sale, Lucy stood tall, a sense of pride within her. "Mr. Mark," she said, "let's do something bigger." Mark nodded, his spirit ignited by her enthusiasm. "That's a brilliant idea, Lucy." As they began organizing a community event, Lucy's confidence radiated throughout Willow Creek. Flyers were posted, and soon, families began to rally together in support of a cause that was so much bigger than themselves. Mark watched as a little girl had turned into a force of nature, organizing donations and gathering support. It filled him with immense pride. What had started as a small act of kindness was becoming a movement. The day of the event arrived, the sun shining brightly overhead. The park filled with families, laughter spiraling into the sky like balloons. Tables were filled with food, clothing, and shoes, all gathered to support those in need. As Lucy stood on a small makeshift stage, she glanced out at the crowd, her heart racing. "Thank you all for coming," she proclaimed, her voice steady and full of hope. The crowd responded with cheers and applause, and in that moment Lucy realized the power of community. Together they could elevate each other, lift spirits, and change lives. Looking at Mark from the stage, she felt a wave of gratitude wash over her. He had sparked this journey the day he bought her those red shoes, but it was Lucy who had taken that moment and transformed it into something profound. In the weeks and months that followed, Lucy continued her efforts, inspiring others to rally around kindness and compassion. The events grew larger and the community flourished. Mark continued to visit, and together they made an incredible team. It became clear that small acts of kindness could lead to beautiful miracles, and the bonds they created changed not just lives, but also hearts. In the end, the girl at the general store had not only found her shoes, she had found her purpose. With each step she took in her red sneakers, she left a trail of hope behind her, creating a world filled with love and compassion. And as the sun set over Willow Creek, casting a golden hue over the town, it stood as a reminder that every little act of kindness can cause ripples, changing lives far beyond what we can see. All it takes is the heart of one courageous child who dares to believe that a simple pair of shoes can carry dreams into flight. Sitting on the cracked pavement outside the general store, a little girl with tousled hair stared longingly at the other children playing in the dusty street. Her bare feet rested against the cool ground, the dirt clinging to her skin like the weight of her circumstances. The sun hung high in the sky, casting warm rays over the neighborhood, but she felt a chill reminder that she was different and alone. Her name was Lily, and although her heart was brave, the harsh reality of her life was not lost on her. She watched as other kids dashed by in bright, shiny shoes, their laughter ringing like music against the backdrop of a fading afternoon. But Lily's laughter was often muted, overshadowed by the longing for something as simple as a pair of shoes. The bell above the general store door jingled, and in walked a man named Tom. He was a traveler with the worn look of someone who had seen many places but carried a smile that told stories of hope. As he turned his gaze around the store, his eyes fell upon Lily. "Hey there," Tom asked, kneeling to meet her gaze. "Lily," she replied, her voice barely rising above the bustling sounds of the store. "Nice to meet you, Lily," he inquired gently, curiosity flickering in his eyes. She shifted her gaze downward, a wave of embarrassment washing over her. "I don't have any," she admitted, her voice quiet but earnest. At that moment, Tom felt something grip his heart. How could a child so full of life be reduced to such a basic need? He thought of the countless times he had taken simple things for granted, how easily he had dismissed the comfort of shoes or the joy of running freely without worry. While browsing the shelves, Tom couldn't shake the thought of Lily. The store was filled with vibrant products and cheerful patrons, but to him, it felt like a facade hiding the reality of that little girl tucked away in the corner. It was those bare feet, dirtied by the world outside, that haunted him. When he approached the checkout counter, he saw Mrs. Wilson, the friendly owner of the store, whose smile always made customers feel at home. He asked, nodding toward Lily. Mrs. Wilson's expression grew serious as she followed his gaze. "That's Lily," she said softly. "Her family has fallen on hard times, shoes for her, food." Tom felt a wave of determination surging within him. He offered, the words leaving his mouth before he fully processed the commitment he was making. Mrs. Wilson raised her eyebrows in surprise but quickly softened. "Not just shoes she needs, it's about dignity too." "Let's do it," he replied firmly, a sense of purpose filling him. He suddenly felt like the universe had led him to this moment for a reason. He walked back to Lily, who was still absorbed in her doll, pretending to have grand adventures. He called, crouching down to her level, a warm smile spreading across his face. Her eyes grew wide, disbelief washing over her face. "Really?" she gasped, her voice barely above a whisper. "Absolutely," he exclaimed, feeling his own excitement swell. She asked, nearly bouncing in place. "Yes, of course," Tom replied, standing up and extending his hand toward her. In that moment, Lily reached out and took his hand, her tiny fingers wrapping around his like a promise. As they walked out of the store, the warmth of the sun enveloped them, and a sense of joy bloomed in both their hearts. They made their way to the shoe store just down the street, the bell above the door jingling as they stepped inside. Rows of shoes stood like candy in a shop, bright colors and sparkling designs beckoning them. "Pick any pair you want, Lily," Tom said, watching delight swim in her eyes as she surveyed the shelves. With wide-eyed wonder, she began to explore. Her excitement bubbled over, and finally she spotted them, the red sneakers, vibrant and alive. She asked, pointing excitedly. Tom laughed, delighted by her enthusiasm. As she slipped on the shoes, a magical transformation swept over her. Suddenly her shoulders relaxed, and a smile broke across her face, lighting her up from within. "Look at me," she shouted, dashing around the store, her laughter bubbling into the air like music. Tom beamed as he watched her whirl around. He called out, feeling a sense of joy that struck a chord deep within him. Once she was satisfied with her footwear, Tom's thoughts turned to the next step. He asked, wanting to make this day even more special. "Food, they're always hungry," she replied, her voice dropping slightly. As they stepped into the grocery store next door, Tom was struck by the stark contrast. The place was bustling, filled with families laughing and chatting, but the sounds felt distant to him as he focused on Lucy. They grabbed a cart and began filling it with fresh fruits, vegetables, and staples that could help her family through tough times. She asked, her eyes sparkling with determination. "Yes, and meatballs too," he replied, amused by her eagerness. They filled the cart with an array of items, and Tom watched as Lily's spirit soared with each selection. She was no longer just a girl without shoes, she was a force of nature, alive with purpose and joy. After they checked out, Tom felt a sense of fulfillment. It wasn't just about the shoes or the groceries, it was about showing Lily that she mattered, that her dreams and needs were important. "Thank you," Lily exclaimed as they stepped out into the sunlight, her new shoes gleaming, her heart full of gratitude. "I'm glad to hear that," Tom said, feeling a warmth spread through him as he knelt down to her level. "But remember, this is just the beginning." As they walked back toward the general store, Lily's laughter filled the air, a sweet sound that wrapped around Tom like a warm blanket. But that evening, while the sun began to set, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink, Tom received a text from an old friend. It was an opportunity to take a job out of town, a chance for a big break he couldn't ignore. The possibility was tantalizing, yet the thought of leaving Lily weighed heavily on his heart. What would happen if he left? Would she be okay? Would someone else step in to fill the void he had just begun to fill? The next morning, Tom made his way back to the general store, his heart heavy with mixed emotions. He knew he had to tell Lily what was happening, but the thought of her heartbreak felt unbearable. Called out, searching for her among the rows of shelves. When she saw him, her face lit up with joy. "Mr. Tom," she exclaimed, her arms wide open for a hug. He knelt down, embracing her tightly. As they pulled apart, he saw the happiness in her eyes and his heart ached. "I have something to tell you," he began, struggling to find the words, but just then the door swung open and in walked a couple of other kids. They rushed past, their voices echoing through the store, interrupting Tom's moment. "Lily." One of them shouted, and she turned to them, delight filling her face. Seeing her joy, Tom hesitated. He felt a wave of fear wash over him, realizing that he might not be there to support her in the way he wanted. Should he stay? Should he leave? The weight of the decision bore down on him like a storm cloud. "Go on, have fun," he said reluctantly, forcing a smile to mask the turmoil inside. But as they ran out together, Tom couldn't shake the feeling that something significant was about to shift, and he was standing on the brink of a crossroads. He watched them vanish out the door, laughter trailing behind them, and felt an emptiness inside him. Was he really ready to leave all this behind? His heart and mind were at war, each side pulling him in different directions. As the day wore on, Tom stayed at the store, helping Mrs. Baker organize the shelves, but his thoughts kept drifting back to Lily. He thought about her laughter, her courage, and how a simple act of kindness had sparked a change in both their lives. Just then, a small commotion erupted outside. Curious, Tom rushed to the window, pushing the curtain aside. He saw a group of kids gathered in a circle, pointing and gasping. He asked Mrs. Baker, worry creeping into his voice. With a furrowed brow, she glanced outside. "I don't know." Together, they stepped outside, and as they moved closer, Tom's heart raced. What he saw made his stomach drop. At the center of the circle, a small boy was teasing Lily, holding a ball just out of her reach, as if mocking her for the very shoes she had just received. He jeered, and the other children laughed. Tom's heart raced. In that moment, he felt the weight of the world crash down on him. How could they be so cruel? How could they not see how special Lily was? Without thinking, he stepped forward, his voice echoing with authority. "Hey!" The laughter died immediately, and the children turned to look at him, shocked. Lily's shoes are special. They represent her strength and courage, and every one of you should learn from her," he continued, his voice steady but filled with emotion. Lily stood there, her eyes wide, a mix of fear and confusion clouding her face. Tom knelt beside her, and without a word she leaned into him, finding comfort in his presence. But just as he thought he had quelled the storm, the boy who had started the teasing stepped closer, casting a defiant gaze at Tom. He sneered. Tom felt a sharp pang in his chest. The boy's words sliced through him like a knife, hitting the very fear he had been grappling with his upcoming departure, the thought of leaving Lily behind. That moment he knew he had to make a decision to choose courage over fear, to stand up for someone who had already begun to change him. "You may not understand this yet, but Lily's worth far more than your laughter. These shoes don't just make her special, they shine a light on who she is. And I will always be here for her no matter where life takes me," he said firmly, looking straight into the boy's eyes. As Tom spoke, he felt an energy shift around him, the power of truth lifting his spirit. The weight on his shoulders slowly melted away, replaced by a fierce resolve. Suddenly, the boy's bravado faded and he looked down, shifting his weight uncomfortably. The crowd of children began to disperse, the power of the moment echoing in the air. But just as it seemed to settle, Tom looked to Lily, who still stood beside him, her eyes brimming with tears. He asked gently, concern filling his voice. I didn't know if you would still be here," she whispered, her vulnerability cutting through him. At that moment, Tom realized he could not leave. Not now, not like this. Lily needed someone in her corner, and he wasn't going to abandon her just as she had begun to rise. "Lily, I'm not going anywhere." "Not when you need me," he promised, his voice steady and sincere. And at that moment, under the golden light of the setting sun, they stood together, a little girl with red sneakers, carrying her world on her shoulders, and a man who had just found his purpose through her courage. But just as hope began to swell within them, a sudden darkness loomed on the horizon, a challenge lurking just out of sight, threatening to unravel everything they had built together. What lay ahead would test their bond in ways they could never have expected, and in that moment, Tom realized that the journey was only just beginning.